Welcome back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And we are here for our true crime edition of Atypical Talk.
I love everything about this.
Joel's not as excited.
I'm just traumatized already. That's really what it is. Thinking about people's families.
Before we get into that, we are going to start with the question, what are you streaming or reading?
So my streaming actually ties into what we're talking about today because that's just who I am as a person. I will say, reading, though, I just finished The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the Hunger Games prequel.
Oh, you finished it. I thought you were still reading it.
Oh, no, I finished it yesterday, yeah. So I've been holding off, like, watching the movie. Because people have said that there are parts that have been left out, and I wanted to know like what those parts would be. So anyways, now I'm excited to go watch it. But streaming, I finished, it's called American Nightmare on Netflix. And again, it's a docuseries. I think it's 3 or 4 episodes about this couple who were asleep in their bed when a couple of people invaded their home and drugged them, kidnapped the girlfriend, and then the next day, like, the boyfriend calls the police. They don't believe him at all. They think he's suspect number 1. They basically told him that he murdered her. Like, where's the body? The whole time he's please go find her. Like, I don't know anything, you know. And then she shows up alive. So anyways, I won't tell you how it ends but they just kept referring to it as a real life Gone Girl situation, if you've ever seen the Gone Girl movie. So anyways, just finished that. It was fascinating. And now I'm 2 episodes into another docuseries called I Just Killed My Dad. So
I wonder why you have anxiety.
I think it started when I was young, when they taught me about like stop, drop, and roll and quicksand. I think that's where it actually started. But anyways, what are you watching?
Well, I'm finishing up, or I'm in the middle of like 4 or 5 books right now. So I'm reading a book called Pivot by Scott McKnight and his daughter Lauren Berenger, which is about church culture and about abusive, narcissistic leaders and founder leaders, which I am one. So it's like very scary reading it, but really healthy. And we're reading it with our elder team at the church. So about 120 pages into that, I just had like 4 different books that I was in for this series we did at the church about politics and Christians engaging in politics. Not in It to Win It by Andy Stanley, which is really great. Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk by Eugene Cho, A Christian's Guide to Engaging in Politics, and a really great work by Caitlin Schiss called A Liturgy of Politics. It's about engaging in politics for the sake of our neighbors. I thought that was really enlightening and all really, really good reads. I'm currently reading a book called A Fellowship of Difference by Scott McKnight as well, about community. So a lot of different books and things swirling around there. And I just finished watching season 5 of a show called Fargo that has been one of my favorites over the last 10 years. It's an anthology series. It's based off of the premise, or at least the setting of this movie from the 90s, Fargo, by Joel and Ethan Coen. It's hysterical because it's like a dark comedy about like sometimes murders, sometimes crime syndicates and things up in like North Dakota, and everybody's also nice and open. Oh, how's this going? Like, you know, that, but there's always like some kind of sinister thing going on in the background. And the most recent season was just amazing. John Hamm from Mad Men played like this really villainous character, which was really cool. And Juno Temple, who was in Juno Temple, who is in Ted Lasso as
Ted Lasso.
Oh, what was her name in Ted Lasso? It was the girl that started the marketing firm. Keely.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. She played Keely in Ted Lasso. She was amazing, kind of the heroine of this series, but it was really good, and really love it. It's off the wall bonkers. So I just finished that, and just probably rewatching The West Wing and The Office is the other thing going on. So that's about where I'm at.
What about you, Abby?
I haven't been streaming anything. That's why I had to include reading, because I've been filling my time.
You didn't have an answer.
Yeah. But I just finished a book called Station 11. Have you read that or watched the show?
I watched the series back in 2021, and I don't know anybody else who ever watched it.
I haven't watched it. I need to watch it now. Yeah, I just read the book.
It was Megan and I's favorite thing from like the whole pandemic era.
Yeah.
I can't wait to talk to you about it more. It's incredible, Abby. Oh, man.
Yeah, so it's about this pandemic that breaks out and kills like 95% of the population. And it talks a lot about, before everything breaks out and life afterwards and stuff. And it was really fascinating. I felt like it had a little bit of a disappointing ending.
I was going to say, I remember you telling me you thought the ending was a little
I felt like it was building up to something, and then it was done. And so that was a little disappointing, but I thought it was just an interesting book, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really excited to watch.
I liked where it doesn't have like a fireworks type ending. It's more of a resolve and kind of thing in the show, at least. But what was amazing about the production of the show is that they started filming the show for a couple weeks in March of 2020, and they had to shut down production of the show because of an actual worldwide pandemic. And then they came back and finished the show.
I can't imagine being weird. A part of that and like a pandemic shutting you down, and you're like, it's happening. Like, here goes 90%
we already wrote the script. Yeah. You want to know how it ends? Yeah.
It was the most original storytelling I think I've seen in a television show or in a story in a long time, in the character arcs. So Station 11, it streams on Max, or I can't believe I just said Max, HBO Max or whatever. It's actually called Max now. I hate that. But it's a really original kind of sci-fi post-apocalyptic story. Loved it.
So I'm going to watch that next. But then last night I started a book called Running Out of Time. Well, I started another one, finished the sample, and then found out I had to wait 2 weeks to get the full book. And so I started a different one called Running Out of Time by Margaret Peterson Haddix. And it's about this little village set in the 1800s, and it's very like Little House on the Prairie type. But then just a few chapters into the book, the mother of the main character like pulls her daughter into the woods and explains to her it's actually 1996 and we are living in this village. It's like the movie The Village.
Yes, that's what I keep thinking.
And we're basically a tourist attraction where people come and watch our lives.
Like Conner Prairie, real life Conner Prairie.
But they're trapped.
Right, that's what I mean. Like if people couldn't leave.
And so it feels like The Village meets The Truman Show type of thing. Like
it's interesting.
It's really interesting, and so I'm excited to read more about that too.
That's fascinating.
On the theme of the day, I thought you were going to say the mom brings her into the woods and she gets murdered. I thought that was what was happening.
No. Well, our first topic today is a Business Insider article titled "Fresh from a Murder Sentence, Gypsy Rose Blanchard is becoming the internet's favorite influencer." The internet has a new star with a dark past, Gypsy Rose Blanchard. The 32-year-old was recently released from prison after 8 years for orchestrating the murder of her mother, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard. She now has more than 9 million followers on TikTok. But Blanchard's story also isn't a simple one, with many thinking she was wrongly imprisoned in the first place. Her mother, Dee Dee, had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, defined as a mental illness where the caretaker of a child either makes up fake symptoms or causes real symptoms to make it look like the child is sick. She would give Gypsy pills to keep her sick and made her stay in a wheelchair. Since her release, Gypsy hasn't wasted any time throwing herself into the media circuit. She's appeared on The View, given a handful of exclusive interviews, and gained millions of followers on TikTok and Instagram. Popular influencers have also helped boost her platform. So we've talked a lot before on here about the issue with making someone a celebrity, but do you think this is worse or better than other situations we've talked on?
For me, and I felt this way until right before we got on this episode, and Joel had no idea who Gypsy was.
I'm learning in real time.
But in my head, I was like, she already had a little bit of that celebrity, quote unquote. You can't see my air quotes here, but because she's been in the news. There have been so many documentaries about her, like so many articles already written about her. So, yes, it's kind of a different celebrity now that she's out, I guess. But I think because people kind of had a knowledge of her, they were just kind of waiting for this, to make it kind of a bigger deal. But you had no idea who Gypsy was, which that blew my mind a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never heard about it, so I watched 15 minutes of interviews and a whole recap of her story and stuff. And I guess my understanding of the story was that she was famous before the murder because her mom would like put her in all these places. And there's a ton of video footage and stuff
I think more
of her
so,
like
like,
as a child who was locally famous.
Yeah,
Okay, because there was like, you know, all the different things where she was like going to Disney World or Make-A-Wish kind of thing. And there were all those, there's a lot of video footage of that. I mean, my first take is like, oh my gosh, what a traumatized individual, to where I'm like, no, she doesn't need to like be gaining a platform. She needs to be in like therapy and reconstructing her understanding of what it means to be a human after she was horrifically abused for all of her life. One of the interviews I watched with her said that when she went to prison, it felt like the very first time she was ever free in her life. And she wasn't making excuses for what she did, but I mean, she was coming from such a traumatized and like deformed place of who she saw herself to be. I'm just like, you don't need a platform right now. Like, this is not the thing that's going to heal you or make you feel better, is the likes and the shares in that way. So honestly, I think it's kind of a sick thing for us to like be so obsessed with her, when I think our hearts should just break for her and we should long for her to just get better. Yeah. Now the other side of that, I can talk myself other side of that too, is like, we can view that as a way of her taking back her voice, or at least having a voice after so much of her life she did not have that voice in that way. And I can be sympathetic to that. I mean, I understand where that view would come from, but like we have talked about before, celebrity is one of those things that overpromises and underdelivers, and it makes us less human than fully human. It's one of those things we should all be mindful of, whatever platform we have, because it can overinflate our egos. It can make us be, our emotions being tied to the ups and downs of what people think about us and how they think about us. I just find it to be something that's unhealthy for all of us, and especially someone who's coming from a topsy-turvy understanding of herself. I'm more worried for her than I am like, this is so great.
Social media.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so there's just a lot of that. Like, I hope she has people who are around her, not to exploit her situation, but to like say, hey, like, maybe you shouldn't comment this, or maybe like, you know, these kinds of things. But yeah, I'm very similar to Joel in that I can see kind of both sides, but also like where my heart breaks is like, during this whole situation, like, why wasn't anyone helping her or, you know, believing her, you know, or like allowing her mom to do these different things? So I'm also like, where's the breakdown, you know, in these kinds of things as well? Because while I get that, you know, she wasn't actually the one who killed her mom and she felt like she had no other options, I'm like, how did she get there? Like, how did we get to run out of options? I don't know. So there's a lot.
It's probably part of the sickness and the control that her mom had through her mental illness to like block out others, so they didn't really see what was
and she went to lots of different doctors like that she didn't think would like communicate and talk to each other, you know. So no, there's a lot, but hopefully she has people around her who are helping and not
exploiting. I mean, that was the word that you used that just sort of struck out to me, is like, where there's money to be made and where there's a platform to be built, I'm anxious and nervous for her as a human, that there are people that are able to make money off of her situation now and exploit her, to which my advice would be like, you just don't need to be in front of a microphone and a camera for a while.
Let's take a time out
and just be a human and like be free in our society and learn from the ground up what it means to be a person, and hopefully to learn that she's loved and that she's enough, and that this terrible cycle of abuse and then the violence of the murder, like, that doesn't have to define her for the rest of her life. Because that's the other reality, is that as she's gone on this media trip and as she's all over the place, she's just more and more tied in with her identity to this thing that she did and she was a part of, and the abuse from her mother, to where you're like, oh, you're more than that. Like, I want her to have like a vision of her life that's more than the worst thing you've ever done. Because we are all more than the worst thing that we've ever done. And it's tragic to me that our hunger for celebrity and hearing of this one person's story is still equating her with the worst thing that's ever happened to her and by her.
Yeah, because how do you ultimately get a second chance when any employer that you're ever gonna, you know what I mean, apply for a job at is gonna Google you one time, and so yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah, for sure. Our next topic today is a Guardian article titled "Mystery Deepens Over Kansas City Men Found Dead in Friend's Frozen Backyard." Jordan Willis hosted 4 friends at his home on January 7th to watch their hometown Kansas City Chiefs win a football game on television. He said goodbye to them and went to sleep. 3 of those men soon died in the home's backyard in freezing weather without him even realizing it, and their bodies were found days later. Now Willis is grappling with public scrutiny and anxiously awaiting the results of tests aiming to determine what substances may have been in his late friend's blood and whether any played a role in their seemingly mysterious deaths, according to his lawyer. Willis said he missed the calls, messages, and visits from the family of his friends and didn't notice their cars were still parked in front of his house. He's become the target of a lot of rumors on social media, with people saying his story doesn't make sense. Police say there are still no signs that any crime was committed. So, Allison and I have both been following this on TikTok for a while. So, Allison, what do you think about
this? Hasn't been on CNN or BBC, so I have literally, again, I've just learned about this story today.
Yeah, it's
Taylor Swift's fault.
Right.
She did
yes,
it. It all comes back.
Yes. I don't even know where to start because, it literally does not make any sense at all. And I, like everyone, have more questions than we have answers because there's no toxicology back yet or anything like that. But even so, I don't know how he can say that he had no idea. For 2 days, you had 3 dead bodies in your backyard. You didn't, and it snowed, and I'll give him that. So maybe the ones out in the yard were covered up. Sure, maybe. The one that caused the police to come because the fiance of one of the ladies was trying to crawl into a window in the backyard that she saw was sitting in a lawn chair on the back porch. So in a bright red Kansas City Chiefs hoodie. Okay. So it had snowed. You look out your backyard, you don't see bright red. That's where for me, I'm like, this is not making any sense. And the fact that this friend was, even if he went outside to take a smoke or whatever it was that caused him to sit in this lawn chair, I'm a grown adult. I'm getting up and walking out. I don't know. Something has happened to where these 3 guys were somehow incapacitated, could not get out of the backyard to go get their cars in the front. It makes absolutely not a single bit of sense to me. And I don't know how there are 4 guys. Well, there were 5 guys at this party. 4 at the time that the host went to sleep. You're the only one that survives? I don't...
Well, there's another one that survived. He left.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
He left early, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, so he wasn't the last one to see these guys.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so...
Yeah. And then I've also heard that the homeowner, the one who's, under all this scrutiny and stuff right now, he also has a dog, and they were found in his fenced-in backyard. Were you not letting your dog out for 3 days?
Right, well...
During snow and all
yeah.
that.
One thing that I also read said that the dogs were technically emotional support for his dad, so they weren't there.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But again, I don't know if that's true or not, because he also said he didn't hear the messages or the people banging on his door trying to get in. But when the police show up and knock, you answered.
Yeah.
So what? Make it make sense, son.
Yeah. And you said yesterday, his lawyers have even been changing their story every time they're talked to.
Yes. His lawyer's not doing him any favors, in my humble opinion. But it does not compute. Yeah. So in your 15 minutes of research or whatever it was before, what are your thoughts?
I don't know why these stories make it to this level without going through our justice system first. Because there's no toxicology report. We're not detectives. We're not people seeing these things. Even in our conversation, there were a couple things that we've even corrected each other on some of the details.
Yeah, we have no idea.
To where I'm just I'm just like cynical of this whole thing becoming newsworthy before there's actually any official police reporting done. And so, there's something fishy, and where there's smoke, there's fire inside of this for sure. I mean, I just can't imagine they won too. So there had to be celebratory drinking. And then I don't know what happened, but you mix guys, macho, and alcohol and football, and something weird went on, and now there's people dead. So it's tragic to me, but something doesn't line up. But I guess my best take is we just got to wait on the actual experts to get in and see the things.
Yes.
The toxicology report's going to be fascinating because what did they drink?
Well, and that's, so again, because I just watched that documentary where those two people were not believed and it turned out that they were telling the truth. I'm like, okay, so if all these things that he says have happened are true, like devil's advocate here, like, then what's the explanation?
Yeah.
Like, I've been trying to think, like, okay, sure, you didn't do anything. There was no foul play, like, then what the heck? Mm-hmm. How did 3 people end up in the backyard? I'm just so confused by this.
Yeah.
And we might not ever know. That's the other part.
Yeah.
But I do love the virtue, even when we can go making theories and all these different things. The virtue of innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. Like, let's see what the burden of evidence shows, and we'll see where this thing lays out. But innocent until proven guilty, but it better be a great claim to innocence with this. There's a lot more questions than answers.
There are so many questions.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see how it all unfolds.
We should put a pin in it. We should put a pin in it and come back when there's a toxicology report and when there's more reporting done. Because it would be interesting to compare and contrast our conversation right now. To me, it would be interesting to compare and contrast our tone and conversation right now to if there is an explanation, and then maybe we can be like, why did we jump to that? Why, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's interesting because we can just jump in the fury of opinions and, there's got to be something. This guy's lying, and maybe. I mean, stranger things have happened, and there's weird explanations to things all the time. So
really,
it's aliens, probably. You're right.
But the fact he also was renting his house and he's already backed up a U-Haul and moved out, like, that also just makes you, even if you're not guilty, it just makes you look guilty. It's not a good look. So I'm like, I really am trying, hoping for the best that you didn't do anything, but man, you're making yourself just look real bad.
Yeah. So our final topic on this true crime episode of Atypical Talk is an ABC News article titled "Alabama to Perform First Nitrogen Gas Execution. What to Know About This Method." An Alabama man has become the first ever person executed via a new method, nitrogen gas, on Thursday. Kenneth Eugene Smith, 58, was sentenced to death for his alleged role in the 1988 murder of Elizabeth Sennett. Smith was to be executed in November of 2022 via lethal injection, but despite multiple attempts, officials were not able to insert an intravenous line to administer the drugs before the death warrant expired. However, medical and legal experts told ABC News that nitrogen gas as a method for execution is untested, and there's no evidence the method will be any more humane or painless than lethal injection. Problems have arisen with lethal injections in the form of botched executions. Officials have struggled to find veins, intravenous lines have clogged with the deadly chemicals, and prisoners have had violent reactions to the dispensed drugs. Doctors are not ethically allowed to help with executions, including lethal injections or nitrogen gas, so the procedures are not done by doctors with medical expertise.
Which that was mind-blowing.
They take an oath. They take an oath to do no harm.
I just had never
I never made that connection either.
Yeah.
But when I was reading,
oath.
and I'm like, why? Okay, so he was supposed to be executed November 2022. Like, what the heck? But they couldn't. They couldn't find a vein. I'm like, aren't these medical professionals? No, just some jail employee. Like,
who took a workshop? Probably.
That is so crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the death penalty can be pretty divisive conversation among Christians. What do you think about this new option?
So the nitrogen gas, before, when we were talking about this, because we were talking about it before he actually was executed on Thursday, and I was like, okay, like, maybe, but the fact that it was untested, which I don't know how you test it, but you know what I mean? I'm like, that just makes me so nervous because you just have no idea. And then after his execution, we were reading an article, about how it went, basically, to see, like, was it, did he just go to sleep? And, but no. He didn't. Yeah. And it wasn't great. And, well, I mean, it's not going to be great, but you know what I mean? Like, he didn't just go to sleep, which is what I think they thought would happen. And so it's all a mess, obviously. I mean, there's, I don't know, what's the humane way to execute someone? There's just not.
It's not humane. It's not part of the design.
I don't know what they're trying to fix. You know what I mean? Like, if it's just a fixing your own conscience kind of thing, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably is. And, just to put my cards on the table, I've probably for the last 10, 15 years, I have found for me an incompatibility with the way of Jesus and the death penalty.
Yeah.
Just an incompatibility for me. And I know you got a couple Bible verses, and we don't have enough time to take it there. Romans 13, a couple things in Exodus, and even some of the eye for eye language. But I would love to talk about that sometime because I think they're just erroneous interpretations. But I just find it to be so incompatible with the person of Jesus and the way of Jesus. And it's so sad to me even reading this article and about the way that we use so much scientific method and creativity to find a new way to kill somebody. Right. When I'm like, man, what if we put some of that ingenuity and creativity in a way to like restore or just to protect people? And for me, the journey with understanding the death penalty through a different lens, I mean, it was probably in college when I started reading some of the work from Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative, who is a lawyer and has worked and is continuing to work to abolish the death penalty in our country. I didn't know this because it's just the water we live in, and we live in the Bible Belt Midwest area of the world where it just sort of feels like, well, it's what you do to people that did the worst thing.
No.
But I mean, honestly, out of United Nations countries, there's only like less than 25% of the countries that still have the death penalty. We're on a list with we're one of the only democratic republics or democratic nations that still have a death penalty. And we're on the list with places in Africa that practice Sharia law, and China that we don't like to be on a list for many other things that still even do a death penalty. When the death penalty was instituted in America, it was really sold as a deterrent for violent crimes, thinking that if we would do this, it would scare people away from doing violent crimes or murder. But the reality is the people that are making those decisions, they're in life and death situations every day. They're not thinking about long way down the road being possibly executed and consequences of it, because they're living with the consequences from other people, not the state killing them every single day. I remember hearing that, well, it's so much more financially responsible just to execute them instead of put them in prison for the rest of their lives. Studies have shown over and over again that it's actually more expensive to execute somebody through the death penalty because of the appeal process, because of the amount of lawyers that are called in and how long it takes for it to happen. It's sometimes 2 and 2.5 times more expensive to kill somebody than to literally just put them in prison for the rest of their life to protect them from society. And then beyond that, I mean, the part that just breaks me just from a scientific way we can study this is the error that we have made, that we know we've made with executing people that have later been found innocent.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the studies from Brian Stevenson and his initiative found that in our country's history of doing the death penalty, 1 out of every 10 people that have been executed have later posthumously been called innocent. Yeah, now, if in the grocery store they said 1 out of every 10 apples that you eat will kill you, would we just keep moving forward? Right. No, we would not be eating apples, right? 1 out of 10, that would be it, even if it was a delicious Honeycrisp. It wasn't worth it. But it just seems that we've been stuck in this is the way that it is, this justice, vengeance reality that we feel like is going to satisfy us, but it doesn't. I mean, so many of the testimonies from people that have been pro-death penalty, or they've actually had family members terribly murdered, or that, they've seen the person that was the cause for their trauma and their pain and their loss be executed, they don't feel better. They actually, it traumatizes them. And wasn't it, they were just celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. a couple weeks ago, but his quote about all that an eye for an eye does is leave the world blind. It's that darkness and hate can't do what love can. And it just breaks my heart that we don't seem to have a collective will and a collective imagination that there's a different way to do this. Now, and the reality is that we all individually, I know I do, like I have those feelings of, yes, like I would want vengeance. Like you say, hypothetically, here I am on my hill saying that I don't want the death penalty. Death penalty is wrong. And you might ask like, well, if your wife was murdered, what would you do? And I'm like, I would want that person dead. But like, I shouldn't be in the driver's seat of that decision. And that's not going to make me feel better. And just to recognize that is a powerful thing. Some of the most powerful stories that I've ever heard have been from people that have had family members be victims of violent crimes, and they don't want there to be a death penalty because they realize that it's a dead end. It doesn't actually deliver what it promises. And so I would love for, especially, people of faith, Jesus people, like, can we just have an imagination for more? Like, can you actually picture Jesus being the one, like the Jesus that you see in the Gospels being the one, like, yeah, give him the nitrogen. Right. Like, you know what I mean? And I say that in a jestful way, but like, he just always he was more creative than that. He would always like find a different way to get the point across. He'd find a different way to get the job done. And I just long for a different way for us to think about it. And let's look at the facts. It doesn't actually stop more violent crime. Yeah. It's actually more expensive.
And
we mess it up.
They don't always work.
They don't always work. Yeah. And we know that there's error in the people that, eyewitness testimony sometimes can be junk. And, there's other things later you find out that, oh gosh, you can't have this happen. Mm-hmm. And not even to mention the fact that, there's not a lot of access to great lawyers for people on death row. There's not a lot of good press in lawyers defending these people. So they get caught up with maybe not the best legal advice because of their socioeconomics and the fact that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I just feel like there's just got to be a better way. And for me, it was kind of like unbelievable to realize that, we're like one of the only democratic nations that still do this, and I'm like, it almost gave me like, wow, it doesn't have to be this way. No. And then I think about the Holy Spirit inside of me that like cringes at the idea. And if I think about my human emotion that it feeds, which is anger and vengeance and revenge, I don't want to feed that, even if it's there. So I'm like, it just doesn't compute with me. So I'm sure that I have brothers and sisters, Christ followers, other pastors, leaders, Christians that see it differently. But for me, I just find it to be incompatible with the person of Jesus and his kingdom and the way I'm called to live it out and be a citizen of his kingdom today. So that's my hot take. I'm sorry to get a little preachy about it, but just hearing this story, just hearing this story and the ingenuity and the way that they're like trying new methods, I'm like, oh my gosh, and then to hear that it was a disaster and it wasn't go gently into the night like you go off into your sleep, like maybe that's just a way of that we're being told that this is not, it's against the natural order of things. And yes, there are people that there's a difference between understanding that what somebody did is worthy of death and then saying that we are the ones to carry it out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that I am wise enough, strong enough. I'm not the right person to carry it out. And I have to look for higher justice than that. And my hands are too small to be carrying that weight.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like when you think about justice or, when, I have no idea because I've never been in this kind of situation where, I know anybody that's gone on death row or anything like that. And so I'm like, for me though, I think being in isolation or something like that for the rest of my life would be almost, this is going to sound stupid, but almost worse because I feel like I would make myself crazy.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, given the option, I'm like, what is the, I mean, clearly death is not the right option, but like, man, life in prison by myself, in a room by myself, like, that's punishment.
Well, and that's
that's punishment.
And that's heading into a whole different conversation about the purpose of our prison system.
Yeah.
Like, there are Western European countries that they actually view the prison system not as a punitive, punishing measure, but as a restorative measure. And that is not how currently our American prison system is built. It's built to punish you for what you did, not how do we restore this person to the best of our ability. Now, it's got to be they've got to walk in it, but restore this person to humanity and to some form of community, honestly, even if it's inside the walls of a prison. And that's an interesting conversation that, again, I have lots of thoughts, and I think the Holy Spirit leads lots of different thoughts of, like, is it just to punish somebody and put them in solitary confinement, or is justice more than just good guys, bad guys, you get what you deserve? I've talked about this recently at church, but when we hear the word justice in our Western American society, we think of, like, you got what you deserve, we got them back. But in the scriptures, justice is talked about all the time, and more often than not, about 70% of the time justice is talked about, it's the Hebrew word mishpat, which is about restorative justice, about setting the scales for the oppressed to have to be on even ground with everybody else, which that's a whole different kind of justice that we're talking about.
We're not talking about that here in America.
And that's not the way that our prison system is bent towards. And if there are people inside of our prison system they believe that, I think that'd be a fascinating conversation. I don't see that being the goal of our prison system. It seems to be more of, we punish you for what you did and keep you away from other people. And I'm like, I got that, keep you away if you're of danger to society, but like that punishing, not trying to restore them to anything. You're right. Like, is that, if it's not the same thing as death, is it on the same path?
Right.
Like, is it like, are we having the same kind of conversation if you're talking about solitary confinement and just in a room with no light, it's not actually death, but man, it's, you're in the same family, like in that same ballpark where I'm like, something inside of me feels like that can't be it. Right.
Mm-hmm. I know. Neither
personally
sounds great.
Neither sounds great.
No.
But I think these are important conversations, and I hope that we can, even if around this table, not having a bunch of pro death penalty rah, like, I hope that in that this can welcome conversations and not, again, people can see things differently. I just would love to hear and be a part of a conversation that I feel like is not just, they did it, they deserve it, shame on them. And I'm like, yeah, those don't all be true, but that what does that feed in us? What does that say about us as a society that we are cheering that? And I want us to be better, and I don't want us to feed those darker emotions, but feed what actually leads us to be flourishing and human. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, it's that reality of forgiveness. When we withhold forgiveness over and over and over again, it actually doesn't fix the relationship, and it turns us ugly on the inside and makes us more bitter, and it makes us uglier while we're thinking about how ugly the other person is. Like, and there's just got to be a different way out of that cycle. And I think if we can have a different imagination, like a kingdom imagination on how do we do justice in our country, that would be a conversation I'd love to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions, topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Atypical Talk Pod. And make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get updates when new episodes go live. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.
A murder, you say?